person, and then all the people that came in contact with that person is called ring vaccination. It's actually how they eliminated smallpox. So they're trying to, but they don't have great vaccine. Not everybody gets vaccinated. There's treatments you can give people, antibodies that have been generated by people who had Ebola that survived. Those can be used as therapy. So again, if you can't get the healthcare workers there because it's too politically unstable, it's harder to control the outbreak. So that's just a little update for you. And if you wanted to hear the whole Science Friday, it's the head of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIAID. I think it was Anthony Fauci, right? Is the head. Anyway, he came on Science Friday and sort of gave an Ebola update. So it doesn't take very long. It's pretty interesting to listen to. All right, so that's just sort of wrap up from Ebola. So we're cleaning up from last time. We were finishing the course introduction and talking about scientific method, and we talked a little bit about the early ideas about where life came from, and then the last part of this lecture is about epidemiology. And what I want to do is make sure you understand the difference between epidemiology and a clinical trial. Because we think about clinical trials all the time, and you'll see a study said, right, in the newspaper. There's always some study they're reporting on. There's really two different kinds of studies that people do. And there's more flavors than that, but two major ones. The clinical trial is the kind of study where we sort of take two groups of people, sometimes more, depending on what we're studying. But I'll give you an example. So let's say that I take half of you, and I say, okay, you guys I'm going to give aspirin to. And you guys, I'm going to give my $100 a tablet new fancy headache medicine. Are you ready? Pennies for the treatment, $100 a tablet. You're with me so far, right? So I'm dividing you into two groups. Then I hit all of you over the head with a hammer to give you all the same kind of headache. Right? I've got a little headache creation machine to give you a little bonk. No? You guys aren't participating in my clinical trial. Okay, then everybody takes either the aspirin or they take their new headache medicine. Sometimes we give people placebos. We give them a sugar pill, right? Or sometimes we give them no treatment. But usually we give them a placebo, but we don't tell the doctor who's doing the testing, we don't tell the patients, because people will think they got a pill, they think they got better. About 30% of when you feel better after treatment, usually about 30% of that is just the placebo effect. You got treated and so you think you're going to feel better. All right, so and then I look at the data. I see that my new $100 tablet headache medicine worked better, right? Or was aspirin better, or was there no difference? Does it make sense to pay for the new expensive headache medicine if the aspirin works just as well? Or maybe my pill works really good, it gets rid of your headache, but there's lots of terrible side effects. You throw up for 3 days, right? Or maybe it kills you. Your headache's gone, but kind of at a high price. All right, so that's a clinical trial, okay? And epidemiological studies are different. So epidemiological studies are a little bit more complicated to understand. In epidemiology, we don't actually give everybody, or give one group one drug and one group another. We just look at broad patterns of society. So we're basically looking at the effects of health and disease conditions in populations that are sort of predefined. So they're retrospective, they're looking back. So for example, with cell phones, we didn't take two groups of people and give one group cell phones and another group no cell phones and see if anybody gets brain cancer. People worry about this, right? They hold the phone near their head. So I want to just reassure you, there's zero evidence that cell phones cause brain cancer. So don't stress about it. They've done lots of studies now. Steve Jobs and Apple didn't come up with the iPhone and they say, we're also going to give half of you the iPhone because we need to do a clinical trial and see how you do till you get to be 100. You can't make money that way, right? Business would never go for that. So we look retrospectively. We could let everybody buy all the cell phones we want. Then we give you a survey and we say, how much time did you spend on your cell phone? What kind of cell phone did you have? And then we see if there's higher rates of cancer in people who spend more time on their phones, or maybe they had the phone near their head instead of using a headset. Lots of studies have been done, millions and millions of people looked at, and there's no credible evidence that cell phones cause any kind of cancer. If you go and Google that and come back next time and say, Dr. Morelli, you're wrong, I found all these websites that say cell phones are really dangerous. There's credible websites, and then there's people just saying whatever they want on the internet, right? So when I say there's no credible evidence, I'm talking about the really well-done studies where people actually look at science and know how to take the science apart and know what a good study and a bad study is, and there's some art to that. Cancer or smoking is where we have lots of epidemiological data. There was actually in one of my favorite blogs, it's called Science-Based Medicine, and they actually had a whole article on cancer or on smoking today. And they were just talking about the fact that 1 in every 3 cancers is probably as a result of smoking or attributable to smoking. They have, it's not just lung cancer, but it's a whole list of different types of cancer. And they were talking about 2.5 million people a year. Boy, I hope I'm saying that right. I have to go back and look. But they have a number of 2.5 million people having died as a result of secondhand smoke. It may have been over a longer period. But anyway, they were just talking about that. This is another example where we have epidemiological data. There was a period of time where everybody was smoking, or lots of people were smoking, and doctors began to notice that the people who were smoking ended up with more kinds of cancer. They had more breathing, they had more asthma, they had more COPD, other pulmonary associated problems. And so they began to do studies. They didn't get half the group cigarettes and half the group no cigarettes and wait 50 years. They looked at the different groups and they surveyed their behavior. Okay, so does this make sense? That's an epidemiological study. And then epidemiology is used to look at lots of things. So this is one of my favorite graphs. This is teen pregnancy rate. I should see what year it is here. I've covered it up. 2004. Teen pregnancy rates per 1,000 girls. And the darker the color, the higher the teen pregnancy rate. What an interesting map, don't you think?
Bible Belt.
So here's one of the challenges. There's some interesting associations here. Would you agree? All right, so I'm going to throw out a hypothesis. I'm looking at this data. This is what scientists do with epidemiological data. I'm going to throw out a hypothesis here. Pregnancy is caused by having sex. It's warmer in this part of the world, and people wear less clothes. It's easier just to have a quickie. All right, that was my hypothesis. Anybody got another hypothesis that they think is, worth testing? Yeah.
The lack of education about sex and pregnancy and STIs and stuff.
Yeah. So Rochelle is saying that maybe the group in this area haven't had as much sex education. They don't know how to protect themselves. I can think of a few others along the line. Anyone else?
I have a question, but is this for including like abortions and stuff, or only like?
I don't know. It says teen pregnancy rate, so I would assume it's fairly comprehensive. Not just births. It doesn't say births, it says pregnancy.
Access to low cost or no cost birth control.
Access to birth control, right? So you're saying that everybody's having quickies. It's just that here they're not protected against pregnancy. Okay, you get yes?
I think also that's to do with the culture. The South is more conservative, and while like the North and the West is more like liberal, and they kind of like open-minded. They kind of like teach about they teach their kids more in the early ages about like sex and everything.
People here are more educated, and
yes.
so therefore they have a better idea how they're going to protect themselves.
Yeah, but the South they really talk about
yeah.
sex in the family. It's more about Christian values and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By making it taboo, they make it way more interesting. When my kids got old enough to learn about sex, I got out a biology textbook and I showed them pictures, and I made it so boring. They didn't ask questions for years after. Oh, Mom, that's enough. I don't want to know. I find science, I'll talk about it. That's what you do. You bore them to tears. And then I think 30 before that. That's not true. All right, so what am I trying to explain here? I'm trying to show you that when you get epidemiological data, there isn't just necessarily one answer. So an epidemiologist has to look at a set of data, and they have to try to ask all the possible questions. My question, although you guys scoffed at it, my temperature question is just as valid a hypothesis as the other. Now you may feel yours are better and they're the fruit of your education and understanding, but it's still a valid hypothesis to come up with. Look at these cold places where there's low pregnancy rates, right? So do you understand the idea here? You can't just pick your favorite hypothesis and test that. You have to test the possible hypotheses that you can get out of a set of data. And that's one of the pitfalls of epidemiological data, but it's pretty interesting. All right, so why do we care about epidemiology? Well, it turns out some of the early microbiologists were also the beginning of the field of epidemiology. John Snow is kind of famous for being, they called him the father of epidemiology, although he wasn't the only one. And he's famous for tracking a cholera outbreak in London. So you probably know that London has the Thames River that winds through it. If you've ever been to London, you see the Thames River. Unfortunately, these days it doesn't smell so bad. But when a river winds through a city and you don't have any sewage controls, then what happens is the sewage that enters the water at the top of the river flows through the city, and the water gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier as it flows through the city. Are you with me so far? Okay, so in the mid-1800s, there were no sewers. People just dumped their waste into the water, and then they would pump water up to drink and cook with. Really gross, yes. So John Snow, and as a result, they would get food and waterborne diseases all the time, and people died of them on a regular basis. So John Snow tracked a cholera outbreak in the middle of London. And so what he did was he built this is like my teen pregnancy map, except for this is a map of London, and everywhere there's a little black square here is where somebody died of cholera. So he made a map of where the outbreak was, and then he figured out that if you kind of look in the center of the map where the most number of cases are, there was a pump, the Broad Street pump, and people were pumping water out of the Thames there. And John Snow is famous for having told the city to remove the pump handle so people couldn't get water from it, and the outbreak went away. Does that mean that he cured them? Well, the outbreak might have been going away anyway. Cholera is killing most of its victims, and eventually they're not putting more Vibrio cholerae bacteria into the water. And so it's possible that the outbreak would have gone away on its own and then just come back, and it probably did. But we know now that he was probably right. He didn't know why the water was dangerous, but it made sense because Vibrio cholerae is a waterborne pathogen, and people typically get sick from cholera from drinking contaminated water. So John Snow is very famous, considered the father of epidemiology. Another scientist that did some really interesting microbiological work that really has its foundation in epidemiology is another scientist named Semmelweis. And Semmelweis is famous for being, he was a physician in Vienna, the hospital in Vienna. And women at this time could have their babies at home. That was the safest place to have them. Women wanted to have them at home. Get a midwife, have your baby at home. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. If you were having trouble delivering, they might send you to the hospital, which was almost a death sentence. And there were two wards at the Vienna hospital. So there was a ward where the midwives delivered the babies, and then there was a ward where the physicians delivered the babies, and no one wanted to be delivered by a physician. Because if you got delivered by a physician, your chances of dying were really high. Turns out that the physicians were all, you had Semmelweis and the teachers, but you had all the trainees, so they would spend the morning in the morgue, no gloves, no running water, no hand washing, right? They would dissect bodies and look at the dead bodies and try to figure out why people died, and then they would go up and deliver babies. And so they would take a woman who had died of childbed fever, dissect her, no running water, right? I'm not kidding. They would go in, they would deliver the babies, and they would get each woman sick because they inoculated her with Streptococcus pyogenes, which is the same organism that causes strep throat, but it also can cause this childbed fever, this infection of the soft tissue, right? And so these women die, and then the cycle goes. It would just cycle. All these women dying of childbed fever would spike and get better, and spike and get better. And Semmelweis noticed this. This is epidemiology. He's like, wow, it's really interesting. The midwives, who don't have nearly as they're not fantastic physicians like we are, How come the babies are dying at a higher rate on the physician's ward? So he had the physicians, he decided maybe it was something on their hands. So he actually had them implement a chlorine hand wash. And when he did this, he observed, so we talked about this. When he did this, this is the data, 1841, 1842, so these are the years. And you can decide to see the childbed fever rates kind of go up and down. But when he implemented the chlorine hand wash, look at this. Suddenly the rates of death from childbed fever were actually more commensurate with what you'd see with the midwives. And the physicians were ticked because they said, I save lives, I don't kill people. Because he's basically telling all these physicians that they're killing their patients by not washing their hands. And everybody was really insulted because this was not practice, and changing habits is really hard. And for about 20 more years, people continued the practice of not washing their hands until about the time of Lister, and all this information sort of filtered out there, and physicians started actually using more sanitary. So even though this data was available, it was 20 more years before it was required to wash your hands. Semmelweis was a great scientist, but he was a terrible communicator. So he hated going to conferences, he hated showing his data, he hated talking about it, he was not very personable, people did not like to hang with him. And he died of obscurity in a mental institution, probably having been beaten to death after a psychotic episode. Really depressing stuff. Anyway, but great scientist, did some really nice early work. Did not have a happy ending, I can tell you. Ignatius Semmelweis. There's actually a book, I read a book about him about 5 years ago. Excellent book. Okay, so epidemiology can help us stop the spread of disease. This is what's happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, right? They are tracking the cases of Ebola where they happen. This is what happened with Zika virus in Brazil, and trying to tie the rates of microcephaly to the increase in the spike in people getting Zika virus. So it's really important to understand epidemiology if you're going to think about infectious disease. And while epidemiology can help us stop the spread of disease, like with John Snow, it doesn't always tell us the cause. He was able to isolate the source being something in the water, but he really didn't understand why. Okay, I'm talking about this. All right, so epidemiology, there's something that you're going to want to know about, and I've got a couple of study guide questions. What observation did Semmelweis make? So this is where you would kind of think about the scientific method, right? He observed that women who were giving birth with the physicians had a higher rate of death from childbed fever than women who were giving birth with the midwives. What hypothesis did he propose?
Motion events will reduce
Yeah.
rate of death by 50%.
And I would phrase it a little different. I would say that the cause of the disease was on their hands, right? And so he proposed an experiment. If you wash your hands, then does that reduce the disease? And his data supported his hypothesis, right? There's another one here. The new vaccine Gardasil, not as new now, protects men and women against infection with the human papillomavirus, which causes cancer. It's a vaccine that protects people against cancer. Scientists are already tracking the rates of these cancers in vaccinated and unvaccinated populations. What kind of study is this? Longitude? I'm looking for a more simple answer. Is it a clinical trial or is it an epidemiological study? It's an epidemiological study. When they first brought the vaccine out, they gave it to some people and not others to see if it was safe. That would have been a clinical trial. But when you're looking at large populations, we're not saying you get to have it and you don't, right? If you go to the doctor and you're the right age and you want the Gardasil vaccine, they give it to you. They're encouraging everyone to get it. So the tracking after the fact would be an epidemiological study. Questions on this first lecture set? Next slide. Okay, so I often am a little behind, but I try not to get behind. So I'm going to move on now to the next slide set, which is the origins of life, evolution, and classification. You guys know where to find these, right? Ready for this? Ready for the switch? Okay. So I like to talk a little bit about the origins of life because we know that the first organisms on Earth were microbes. And that's what this class is all about, is microbes. So it makes sense to spend a few moments talking about how they contributed to all of life on Earth. One of the words that we use in this class a lot, particularly in lab, is sterile. So sterile means the absence of any life. So when you run the autoclave, before you open the door and let air in again, it's sterile in there. There's nothing living in there, if you did it right. So sterilizing something means you killed all living things. And when Earth was formed, we know that it was sterile. There wasn't life on Earth. Okay? It was said for prebiotic before life. It was hot, it was volcanic, it was a very unpleasant place. You would really not like it because there was no atmospheric oxygen on early Earth, very little. Right now this room is about 20% oxygen. In the early Earth, it wouldn't have been enough to keep you alive. Very small amounts of oxygen. Because the oxygen you breathe is produced by bacteria and plants that photosynthesize. All right, so we get to use our clickers for the first time here. So I'm going to click this, and it may tell us, let's see if people are able to click in. If you're not, we're going to need to adjust them. It looks like I'm out. So, all right, so the fact that nobody is clicking in means we need to change the setting. So I'm going to stop this. And let's It's funny that it didn't,
It says no base.
yeah. it's-
What frequency?
But there is a base, so the reason is because it's probably set, I need to figure out, let's do this. We're gonna have to do this. This is, they gave me a new set. And so the base and the clickers have to be coordinated. So let's, settings. All right, so sub-frequency code, let me just change this to AA. And let's see if that fixes the problem. And if it doesn't, then we'll go from there. Wait, how do I sit here? That's fine, I don't care about that. All right, let's try again here. So probably these are set to AA and, all right, and so if I do, we're gonna go back a slide. Okay. Try now. Ah, now it's working. See the numbers up here? This is how many people have clicked their clickers. All right. And then my clickers are kind of fun. So a lot of times I wait for everybody to answer and then I show, but you can also show the graph in real time. And then people change their answers. Thank you. All right, and so the answer is actually 5 billion years, which it looks like a lot of you already knew. Hopefully you saw that in the reading today, yeah? Okay. All right, so it's about 5 billion years old. So the Earth is about, let's see if we can stop this. All right, so the Earth is 4.5 to 4.9 billion years. It depends on who's doing the calculating and how they're doing the calculating. So there's sort of estimates, astronomical estimates. There's estimates based on decay of radioactive atoms, things like that. We know that life has been around for about 3.5 billion years. And things that you think of as life, the things that you can see, large macroscopic things, without a microscope, these have been around for about 900 million years. So really only about a 20% of the Earth's lifespan have there been big enough living things that you can see them without a microscope. Pretty amazing, right? We think we've been here for a while, but actually human beings have just been just on Earth for a tiny, tiny amount of time. Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions. The theory of evolution explains how life arose on planet Earth. Is that a true statement or a false statement? I'm asking a purely scientific question, not a spiritual one, so. All right, so I have 46, I should have 50 clickers. If your clicker doesn't look like it's turning on, or 47, okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop this and let's have a look and see what you guys said, because I wanted to see if people commit to their answers here. About 50-50-ish, yeah? And so the answer is false. And before you say, oh my gosh, she's not a scientist, let me explain why I say false. Because we know after the very first organism arrived on Earth, the first living thing, we know that all life arose from that organism. And the theory of evolution explains how from that first organism, all other life arose. That's what the theory of evolution does. Here's what the theory of evolution doesn't do. It doesn't tell you how life got here in the first place. That doesn't mean that there isn't a good scientific answer, it just means we don't know what it is yet. Does this make sense? So is this really, we're talking about a cutting edge of science here. This is the line to which our knowledge goes and then stops. There are several different hypotheses for how life got on Earth, so I'm going to share those with you. But I want you to understand that I'm not saying that they're correct, because people are still trying to figure this question out. How did life get here? We don't actually know yet. And really smart people who do lots of great research are still arguing with each other, and no one's come up with a plan that everybody believes in yet. Which is why I like that question. So one of the first experimenters asking about the origins of life was Miller and Urey. I can't remember who was who, but one of these was this professor and the other was this graduate student. And what they did is in a chemistry lab, they tried to simulate the conditions of early Earth. So they took the same gases and liquids that were on early Earth and they shocked them with electric shocks like to simulate lightning, to try to add the same amount of energy to the system. And what they found is that they were able to produce the precursors to some biological molecules by doing this. All right, so that you could actually have biological type molecules produced by simply an inorganic chemical reaction based on the conditions on earlier. So some scientists have used this to argue, they call it the warm pond theory. The idea that there were these pools of water and they had the right sort of precursor chemicals and they were getting all this energy put into the system with these lightning storms that were prevalent on early Earth, and they created biological molecules, and somehow those molecules assembled into the very first living organisms by random chance. Are you with me? All right, is there a question? One of the arguments that against this, although it's against really any of these sort of random chance, is I call it the cathedral argument. So a cathedral is made of bricks, right? And you organize the bricks into this beautiful building. So a pile of bricks, all the starting materials, getting those into the cathedral is hard, right? So, they're saying by random chance, something far more complex than the bricks to form a cathedral somehow self-organize into a living thing and begin to self-replicate. You have to, there has some math behind it and say that it's really possible to happen, and that people believe that it possibly could. So just kind of getting back to this warm pond theory, this is Campbell's primordial soup. Have you heard of the primordial soup? So this is this idea that there were these warm ponds with just the right molecules in them, and this is kind of the cute little cartoon. Water, it says, I guess you can't see that, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen potassium, cyanide, potassium acetate. Anyway, it's kind of fun to read the list of ingredients that don't sound that tasty. All right, so just again, thinking about this, we have the sterile earth, this idea that some molecules, prebiotic synthesis, maybe some RNA, some early proteins got made, and that somehow they were able to begin to make copies of themselves. And there's some evidence that RNA, which in our cells is used as kind of a messenger between DNA and protein, that maybe RNA was the first genetic material, and DNA evolved from RNA. RNA can function a little bit like an enzyme. So maybe the first RNA molecules began to copy themselves and then direct the synthesis of proteins. There's people who have argued that some of the mud on early Earth had the right amount of sort of lipid-like qualities to form a membrane around these self-replicating RNAs, and that this became sort of like the first cell walls and helped divide these RNAs into little units like the cells that we have today. So people have tried really hard to come up with a hypothesis for how life may have arisen on early Earth. This is called the RNA world, and it's a hypothesis that life began with RNA. We know that early Earth, there was no photosynthesis and there was very little oxygen. There was likely very little carbohydrate, because that comes from plants for the most part. Mostly what was on Earth was inorganic nutrients and methane, so hydrogen gas, hydrogen sulfide gas, iron. And then there were these hydrothermal vents. And it's interesting.